asset allocation is one of the key areas where we fundamentally diverge with our peers and the industry in general. Forming a regional macro view based on relative GDP prospects, PMI numbers, confidence statistics, PE valuations, dividend yields, for example, it's all very well. But how does this really help you determine the direction of the financial markets? And how does that even get you to select the right fund in the first place? I would argue that the industry goes about this the wrong way around. And continental Europe is a classic example. I think you could very easily put together a persuasive argument that the region was headed for meltdown. I think that you could say that Spain and Italy are on their knees because of the coronavirus with no coherent way of paying their way out of the situation. Already on the brink of recession before all of this, we may well have another pig-style debt crisis on our hands. And ultimately, we've got the death of the EU before the year is out. Now, right or wrong, pile this up, you conclude that you should underweight the region. And I think you could argue that that's a logical conclusion. But is it? Because the evidence of the last quarter certainly suggests not. Our one single fund in the region, one of our largest across all of the portfolios, was actually one of the best performers. And by the end of March, it was down, but only by 9.7%, which compares to a loss of 17% for the Europe ex-UK index. Now, I've added in here the UK buffertology on the chart as a point of reference. That fell broadly in line with the index over the period. By the 21st of May, the Europe Fund was now in positive territory, and that compares to a big loss of almost 10% still for the index in sterling terms. And the reason for this, it is full of quality names. SAP, Ferrari, Heineken. Europe has some of the very best companies in the world. If you conclude that the region is headed for trouble, you go underweight, you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And of course the same goes for the UK. You could have put together a similarly bearish case countless times over the last 5 years and missed out on some great returns. Now, interestingly enough, of course, you could have put together a really bullish case and you could have bought the index and still missed out on some really great returns, as the chart clearly shows here. Now, the Buffertology Fund is up 70% over the period compared to just 5.6% for the all share over the last 5 years, and much more than that going back further. So this is why we spend our time trying to find the truly outstanding funds, because a macroeconomic view really doesn't get you very far. And we strongly refute the notion that fund managers cannot beat the market for extended periods, because we are holding funds with long records of significant outperformance in every category, including the notoriously difficult US. If you want to know what their funds they are, please get in touch. Happy to share it with you, along with the name of the Europe Fund I've mentioned there. Apologies for being so elusive. So instead of starting out from a top-down basis, we start from the bottom up. Our universe isn't dictated by the length of track record, the fund size, for example, and the selection process isn't driven by metrics such as the Sharpe ratio or active share, although obviously we certainly look at them. Instead, we sift through all of the available funds and we search for predefined factors, create a criteria. And this is a fairly manual task because these factors tend to be far more qualitative than quantitative. We like to see a manager with a clear methodology, someone who has demonstrated that they have discipline, and someone that doesn't get too emotional. Now, these factors aren't always easy to put a number on. Knowing where to look comes from experience. And it's probably relevant here that my background is in equities. I was trained as a UK sector analyst, as a stockbroker back in the 90s. I went on to take a more global generalist role before moving on to the buy side and running money in a listed fund, a global equities fund. So I understand the toils, the pitfalls, the fears, the hopes only too well that managers have. I certainly wasn't trained as a fund analyst, although I suppose that's largely what I am these days. So it's one thing to identify if a manager has a certain style. It's knowing if that style is any good that really matters. For us, when it comes to equities, the focus is on quality. Now, each fund manager will have a slightly different interpretation of what quality might mean. Keith Ashworth-Lords comes very much from a business perspective investing background, with a Buffett overlay, obviously. Valuation is important, but it should not be the very first thing that you look for. And what has proven to be very relevant here is that quality companies don't go bankrupt easily. Bankruptcy means permanent loss of capital. You can't make it back if you crystallise that loss. So the likes of Carillion or Debenhams would never have appeared in any of our portfolios. As the motor racing quote goes, if you want to finish first you have to finish. So we want to see companies in our portfolios with some kind of enduring competitive advantage. That might be through branding, very often it's through intellectual property. It often comes with a deep moat in the sense that competition is kept away by high barriers to entry. We like to see businesses that will grow regardless of the wider economic environment. Very often these companies tend to provide operating metrics that reveal very high levels of cash generation and carry a strong balance sheet. Now, this style of investing isn't new. It isn't a fad, and it's really been the basis for why Warren Buffett at the age of 89 has made himself the fourth richest man on the planet. Now, it has certainly helped his cause that the culture of creating these types of business are based in the US. Their pro-business, low-tax philosophy, it's cultivated an entrepreneurial spirit that's put them into a position as a world leader in business. Nowhere is this more evident than in technology. That is why, since running these portfolios, in addition to a heavy exposure to the US, we've had a heavy exposure to technology, a dedicated exposure through several different funds over the period. But as a consequence, the likes of Microsoft, MasterCard, Google, PayPal have featured heavily and been major contributors. So by following this quest for quality, it is no coincidence that the portfolio has had zero exposure to UK oils, zero exposure to UK banks so far this year, and very little exposure to the weak leisure companies, the areas that really have been hit the hardest. Quality has held with the best, despite what might have optically appeared to be a higher valuation, because you get what you pay for. And I would argue very strongly that these companies will always demand a premium valuation. Right now, you might want to call it a COVID-19 premium, but that suggests a temporary nature to it. Regardless, we are seeing the benefits of this quality magnified right now. The weaker companies deserve a discount, again, maybe a COVID-19 discount you might call it, but the situation seems more concentrated at the moment, and the threat is likely to continue as long as second and third waves or a new strain exists for the disease. So if your clients have been in a portfolio that has performed poorly of late, I think it is a huge leap to assume that by staying with the same strategy, this will get you out, because it could very easily get much worse. Now, I appreciate that in such a terrible period for returns, you might think that the tone here is a little bit blasé. But if I can take a positive out of this, it is the period has provided some degree of validation to our process. Now, by no means do I think that we have the solution, but the work that we've put in over the last few years has certainly paid off. It isn't luck and it isn't chance. It is through trying to know what is knowable. Instead of trying to guess what direction the markets are going in, we will never know this, by the way. Nobody will know this. Our time is best spent trying to find new managers. It's very time consuming. We find ourselves going down a lot of blind alleys, and it takes a heck of a lot to impress us. And as a result, the turnover across the portfolio is typically very low. But in the last few weeks, we've actually found a few really interesting new funds that look set to be added to our portfolios soon. These names, actually, I suspect most people will have never heard of. I certainly hadn't until recently. So if you'd like to find out which funds these are, please get in touch. We'll be happy to share this with you. Now you can get in touch with me, details here, or alternatively Mark Atherton or Alistair Power, and we'd be delighted to set up a call or maybe a video conference. So thanks for watching. If you found this useful and watching it on YouTube, please subscribe below. Over the next few weeks, there will be a steady stream of new videos coming out from us, Any questions, any feedback, please get in touch. We'd really like to hear from you. And if I can give anyone a top tip, it must be 4 or 5 months since I wore a tie and a jacket. It really lifts you. Try it for half an hour, you'll see what I mean. Hey, I might even have a shave next time.